Welcome back. Today we will continue with our calendar lesson. So, this is the second portion of the calendar lesson. I might be able to finish this today. If not, I'll have to do it again today and then the following week. Um, but basically, where we were before is we kind of went through the cycle of prayer, what we do on a daily basis, what we do on a weekly basis, what we do in the Octohijos with the Iothinon cycle, and then we got to what we called the Menean, the monthly cycle, which is where we are. We remember that last time we spoke about how the church year, ecclesiastical year begins in September, September 1st. And we went through all of September and then got through all of October. So today we'll begin with November. Now, I like to look at November as a very wonderful time of the year. There are several reasons for this, but many of the saints that I have grown fond of over my lifetime have their feast day right here in November. Actually, really the first 2 weeks in November. So I'll start there. So in November we have the first of November, we have the Venerable David of Evia, who is a saint that started the a monastery there. Saints Cosmas and Damien, who are unmercenary healers. They're pretty big saints. Then on the 2nd of November, this is the day that I was ordained to the holy priesthood, and I didn't know why I was ordained to the holy priesthood on November 2nd. It was something that perplexed me because, I was born on the feast of Saint George. I met my wife on the feast of Saint Raphael. So major events happen along the lines of major feasts in my life. At least that's been my experience. So I was ordained to the priesthood on November 2nd. I looked at the calendar. If I had, you know, waited, or been ordained the day before, I would have fallen on the feast of Saint Raphael of Brooklyn because that falls on a Saturday. If I would have just been a week later, that would have been on the November 9th, which was Saint Nectarios of Aguina, and I'll tell you about him later. So I was ordained on November 2nd, and the saints did not know who they were. Later, come to find out that I was ordained on the feast of Saint Gabriel of Georgia, the Fool for Christ, and I learned about his life, and he's really a fascinating contemporary figure. Uh, he lived amongst us in the country of Georgia, in Tbilisi, Georgia, in the capital, and he was a priest there, like kind of like a monk priest. But he was a fool for Christ, so he acted really strangely in front of the people, kind of like crazy. And his one of the major stories of his life was when it was like Pascha, Saturday, Holy Saturday. He just finished the morning liturgy, and he was walking across the square, heading to another church for the evening liturgy, and for the Paschal Rush service and the Christ is risen service, and he got sidetracked. I suppose he saw this. There was a parade happening that day in the square, and they had these huge images of Lenin and Stalin, and so he and like we're basically like venerating them as if they were saintly or godly or something like that. And so somehow there was like a can of gas nearby. So he looked at it, he saw it, he was inspired by God. He took the can of gas and he put it on this image, this very tall, like 2-story image of Lenin, and he lit it on fire. He walked up to the top of the roof of the building, which was like the third story, and he started crying out to the people to repent. That these guys, look at them, they're not gods, they're not anything. The one true living God is Jesus Christ, who rose from the dead. These guys will die or have died, and they will not rise. Stop worshiping these false idols and that kind of thing. So they ran up. The military ran up and like beat him mercilessly, very close to death. Actually, someone held them back from killing him, and saying and citing, if you kill him, he'll become a martyr. Then they'll really like venerate him. Those crazy Christians, and so they basically beat him very near death. He was hospitalized for many months, and then after he came to, they put him in a psychiatric ward for about several years. So he really suffered a lot for the faith after that. After doing that, he's known for many miracles in this day, and is known for revitalizing Georgia and bringing the country of Georgia back to its Orthodox heritage. So I'm honored, in other words, to be ordained on his feast day, though I didn't know that at the time of my feast of my ordination. And I met him. He was smiling at me. It was a beautiful day. And so yeah, that's Saint Gabriel of Georgia, the country, not the state. On the first Saturday of November, we celebrate the feast of Saint Raphael of Brooklyn. Now, he's also a great saint for me. Me and my wife met on the day that he actually reposed, which is February 27th, 1905, 1915, 1905 or 1915. 1915 is when he reposed, right before World War, or the World War One. He is a really interesting saint because he crisscrossed across America a whole bunch of times, and he's the first bishop that was consecrated bishop on American soil. He came here to take care of the Arabs, or the Syrian people, in America, by the Russians. So he was trained by the Greeks in Crete, if I'm not mistaken, in Halki rather, and he got educated there. His parents were from Damascus, Syria. His parents' spiritual father was Saint Joseph of Damascus, who reposed in 1860, when there was a massacre in that city of 2,500 Christians. His parents, Saint Raphael's parents, were able to flee the city, and while she was pregnant, holding him. He was born in Beirut, which is now Lebanon, and then he kind of like a young, sickly guy, but very intelligent. So they ended up sending him to a Greek school where he learned, and then he got mad at the bishop, and he spoke out against the bishop what he accused him of simony, which is something that comes from the book of Acts, uh, where you can try to buy your seat, or try to buy the sacraments of the church, or something along those lines. Um, and he accused the bishop of doing that, and was basically sent away. He went to Russia, lived in Russia for many years, and um, took care of the Arabs that were in Russia. And then he was assigned to come and take care of the people in New York, New York, Brooklyn, New York, right? So he comes to America, and he ends up becoming the first bishop of America, consecrated in America rather, and he crisscrosses the whole country, and established like 30 different churches. That was 1915 when he reposed, so I got that date now. And our church was founded in 1921, so we just missed Saint Raphael by about 6 years, here in Atlanta. But I hope that he's a really fascinating figure in American Orthodoxy. So definitely take time to learn who he is. We celebrate him on the first Saturday of November, so that we can always celebrate him. As you'll notice, when we get into Lent, February 27th, generally falls in Lent, so we won't always get to have a liturgy for him. So our bishops decided here in America that we want to celebrate him, so we put it on the first Saturday of November to celebrate him every every year for sure. The 8th of November is called the Synaxis of the Archangels. So this is Saint Michael, Saint Gabriel, or the Archangel Michael, the Archangel Gabriel, the Archangel Raphael. Um, so like and there's seven archangels. I can't remember them all off on my head, but it's a synaxis. It means the gathering of them. So we celebrate all of them on this day. It really gets a nod to the Archangel Michael and Archangel Gabriel to some degree, but Archangel Michael is really like the head of these of the saints. The next day, November 9th, is Saint Nectarios of Agina. Saint Nectarios is this wonder-working bishop. I believe he died in 1940, so he's a relatively modern day saint, and he was basically not treated properly by anybody when he was alive. And he did all these wonderful things and just was a very humble and pious man and bishop, but he never really actually got to like assume his bishopric because people were jealous of him, and so they kind of prevented him from actually being a bishop. He ends up starting a monastery on Agina, on an island, and with a bunch of nuns. They accused him of doing all these crazy things with these nuns, which he didn't do. He was a very pious and humble and straight man, and he died in a hospital, looking like a poor beggar kind of thing. Uh, when he died, his they took his garment and they put it on the bed of this guy who had some kind of illness, and the other guy was healed of the illness from the garment of Saint Nectarios. So Saint Nectarios later becomes very widely known for healing people. So he's a wonder worker in that respect, and most specifically, he's known for healing cancer, and so many people go to him and ask for his healing presence in their life, and he obliges, and it's so much so that they generally send him thank you to his monastery in Agina, and they built this massive cathedral over there in his honor, in his name. I mean, it's massive, it's beautiful. If you ever get to go, it's certainly a wonder. He's interesting. There's other interesting things about him. My wife and I did get to go to see him uh, at the monastery. Now, when he's just laid out in a tomb, or he was above ground tomb, like marble encased, and if you put your ear to his tomb, you can kind of hear him like snoring a little bit. It's not like it's really interesting. It's kind of neat to hear it. But yeah, it might surprise you if you get to experience that and you're not aware of it. But my wife and I looked at each other because we both heard him snore. So it's like he didn't die. He's sleeping. He's sleeping. He embodies that. On the 12th of November, we commemorate John the Merciful of Alexandria. This is a bishop who was so gracious and so giving to the poor. So much so that people would just line up and he would just give and give and give. So he got a reputation for being an almsgiver, or the merciful, because he had a lot of mercy on a lot of people. There was one story where this guy got in line like three times to get like this bag of goodies from that he had to offer him, and he got in line three times, and John the Merciful's you know helper was like, Sayedna, this guy's been in line 3 times now. He goes, yeah, I know. He goes, oh, why are you going to give him a third time? He goes, how do I know that that's not Jesus Christ testing me? And so, St. John the Merciful. The next day is St. John Chrysostom, who is like a giant, among uh, bishops, a giant among the all the hierarchs of the church history. He is just renowned. His name Chrysostom or Chrysostom means golden mouth. It means that when he orated, everything that came out of his mouth was like pure gold. And there is an understanding that the reason he spoke so well and so eloquently was because St. Paul himself whispered into his ear. And that's how he was able to orate so eloquently. He was very masterful with the Greek language, and just really encapsulated all of the imagery that you really need as a teacher, as a pastor. We still have many of his orations written down in volumes and volumes of work, and you can really hear this golden mouth speak. We also hear his sermon on Pascha. It's a famous sermon, like death, where is thy sting? Hades, where is thy victory? You know, and he just the imagery that he's able to espouse. Every priest in the world on Pascha will read this famous oration, this Paschal homily of Saint John Chrysostom. It's really absolutely fascinating. He's one of the greatest of all of the church hierarchs. We'll talk about that more when we get to January. Um, and at the end of January, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Then you have the Holy Apostle Philip. This is Philip, who is found in the New Testament several times. He is the apostle that calls Nathaniel to come and see. Nathaniel famously asked, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Saint Philip says, "Come and see." He's also one that says to Jesus when he's about to feed the 4 or 5 thousand, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish, but what are they amongst so many? We don't have enough food. In other words, what are you going to do with it? It's not enough food for all these people. So Saint Philip is, kind of known for being the witness to the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. Um, he goes to his death, where the city that he dies in converts at his death. He was about to be killed with Saint Bartholomew, as well as Saint Mariamne, who's his sister. She was going to go to her death with him, and they put him up on a cross, and they then there was this massive earthquake as soon as he died. So they quickly went to take him down. He was already dead. They took Saint Bartholomew down, and Saint Mariamne down, and saved them from their death. And then Saint Mariamne definitely lived to die of natural, what we would call natural causes. I can't remember what happened to Saint Bartholomew, but it's an interesting story. He was a witness. He was a witness to the the till the end, still calling us to come and see our Lord. And I think this is a good request to ask of anyone, to come to the church and see. Come and see for yourself. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Come and see, and hopefully we'll be able to show you. Christ will show you that He is good. As soon as you hit St. Philip on the 14th of November, we get into a period of fasting in the church called the Nativity Fast, also known as Advent Fast, also known as the St. Philip Fast. And the reason for that is because we just celebrated the feast of St. Philip, and now we launch into a fasting period for 40 days. Now, this fasting period is admittedly not as rigorous as, say, Great Lent. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. I mean, obviously, in this country, we kind of have all these Christmas parties way before Christmas, and you get into the Christmas season as soon as as soon as October 31st hits, or something like that, and we start seeing Halloween before even Thanksgiving celebrated. We start seeing Christmas everywhere. Um, and then as soon as Christmas happens, everything stops with Christmas, something along those lines. So it's like, but in the church, we fast before we feast, and then the feast goes on for a while. Um, that's not really what happens in this country, certainly. Um, but the Christmas fast in general, even in Orthodox countries, is practiced differently everywhere than there's no consistency across the board. So some churches will have it be very strict in fasting, and some will have it be relatively mild in fasting with a lot of light and prayer or fasting rules and so on and so forth. Um, so whatever wherever you land on the fasting scale, just keep this as your pious tradition in your house, and understand that not everyone keeps this fast as perhaps as rigorously as you do, and that's okay. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. There's there's the 12th of December, where it gets really intense for the Greek world. So up until the 12th of December, you can still have weddings in the Greek archdiocese in North America. In the Antiochian tradition, which we are part of, you can't have a wedding during this fasting period. But if you write a letter to the metropolitan, he may make an exception to happen before Saint Spiridon, understanding that this is something that is not out of line because of the way that this fast is kind of feasty. And I'll show you how it's feasty, anyways, and how it differs from Great Lent drastically. So, like I said, St. Philip happened on the 14th, so in a fasting period, we tend not to have big name saints. The Christmas fast has a lot of big name saints, so let me go through them uh, here with you. So right away, the 16th of November, Saint Matthew, the apostle, an evangelist. So this is the Matthew that was a tax collector. Jesus saw him, nobody liked him, and he said, come follow me. And he immediately left his tax office and followed Jesus. So Matthew is the evangelist, so he wrote one of the four Gospels, the Gospel according to Matthew. So he's a pretty big deal, considering we have that feast day for him. And so again, this is in a fasting period, so it's a big feast in a fast. Gregory of Neo Caesarea. Anyone named Gregory is pretty much a big deal. And there's a lot of them, and I can't keep any of them straight. You have the entrance of the Theotokos into the temple on the 21st. So this is when the Theotokos, at the age of 3, enters into the temple, and that's where she is given over to the temple, and that's where she lives. Now, her uncle is Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist. So this isn't really abnormal or anything like that. but she dedicates her life to God in service of God and in prayer. And she is able to go into the Holy of Holies in the temple. And we understand that she is the Holy of Holies because she is the one who has God in her womb, who carries God in her womb, right? So, she really gets to spend as much time in the Holy of Holies as she wants, where no one else can go. And she does that through her life. But this is a big parade, a big deal. Her parents made Joachim and Anna made a big festival over her entrance into the temple, and so we continue to hold this major feast again inside of a fast. Uh, so there you go. Clement of Rome. He's one of those early authors of some letters, right? So early letters of the apostolic fathers, like I'll talk to you about the letters of Saint Ignatius of Antioch, Saint Clement of Rome, kind of the same thing. Catherine, the great martyr. Okay, this is the Catherine of St. Catherine's Monastery on Mount Sinai is named after her. Uh, she is like this brilliant, scholarly, and beautiful woman. I mean, like physically attractive, plus intellectually attractive. Like, just she had the best of both worlds. Super smart, super beautiful. Everybody wanted to be with her. Whatever man married her was going to be the luckiest man in the world. And she, rightfully so, wanted someone her equal, if not her better, because she wants someone to better her. Who is that? They look, they can't find a suitor that matches her. Um, so there's her mother has a priest in secret, and she goes to the Christian church in secret, and she says, "Oh, my priest wants to meet with you. He has someone for you." And he pulls out an icon of Jesus Christ. And he says, "Oh, this man is smart. He's smarter than you. He's smarter than everybody. And he's more beautiful than you. He's more beautiful than everybody. And he was a king from birth." You have to be a prince first before you become a king, right? And she's like, and he showed her an image of him, like in the olden days, you show a painting of your suitor. You don't get to meet him right away. He's far in a faraway land, right? So she she says, "Okay, I'd love to meet him." Well, he goes, "This is what you need to do. Go to your room, take this image of him, and think about him. Pray about it, and I'll show you how to pray, and whatnot." And so she went to her room and she prayed in front of this icon of Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary. And then she had a dream, and Jesus was being held by the Virgin Mary, Theotokos, and he's like, his mother goes, "Hey, look how beautiful Catherine is. Look how smart. She's so smart. She's amazing." And he goes, "Ugh, she's ugly. Ugh." So she woke up, and she went and told the priest what had happened with the dream that she had had. And she completely changed her life around. She was baptized. She became a Christian, and she started to study and so on. And then she had another dream, and this time Jesus gave her a ring. He put a ring on it. So she was betrothed to Jesus Christ. Her hand that received this ring is incorrupt to this day, and it still has the ring that Jesus Christ put on it. So you can look that up on Google if you would like. Um, But yeah, the hand of Saint Catherine, it's still incorrupt. This is about 1700-year-old story, and she ends up converting about 50 people, the most masterful orators of her time. She just danced circles around them with her orations, and preached Christ to them. They all converted actually, and then they were killed. She was also killed by a wheel, so put a wheel around her and killed her. So she's oftentimes, um, depicted in this like royal regalia, and then she has this massive spiked wheel that's her in her image. She's really a fascinating, great martyr. So she's pretty big time, big deal. She's on November 25th. So so far, how many have I told you about? Right in this 2 week period since the fast began. So we're feasting pretty much. Um, so much throughout this. All right, so then we get to Saint Iakovos. He's a new modern day saint of Avia. So remember, I told you about Saint Venerable David of Avia. So he started the monastery. He actually appeared to Saint Iakovos of Avia, and kind of Iakovos kind of reestablished this monastery in Avia. Really a new story that I don't know very much about, but something very interesting if you're interested in some of these newer newer Greek saints that are really taking the world by storm and taking us all captive. Um, Andrew, the first called apostle on November 30th. Andrew is a huge, huge saint in the church. He was able to go all around the world and bring Christianity to the people. He went everywhere, including what is believed to be Constantinople when it was still a small town called Byzantium. So he is, of course, the patron saint of Constantinople and the bishopric there. And he's, the first called. So the bishop of Constantinople, says that he's first, kind of thing. So there's definitely a connection there. He is a really big apostle. Uh, Father Josiah Trenum gave a really beautiful homily on him many years ago. You can probably find it in the archives of online somewhere. But that's the patron saint of the Riverside Church in California, and so he gave a really nice homily on their patron saint, and rightfully so. You got December. You have a bunch of prophets: Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah. First, second, and third. On the second of uh, on the 2nd of December, we also celebrate a new saint named Porphyrios of Kavsokalivia. Porphyrios of Kavsokalivia, and he is going to be famous for writing a book called Wounded by Love. I have not yet read it yet, but everyone who reads it tells me how incredible it is. But he's one of these newer saints in the church, and very well respected and very well beloved. So there you go. We're still in a fasting period. Remember, see how many feasts we have. The 4th, December 4th, December 5th, and December 6th, and December 7th. We have pretty big saints. Again, the 4th, Barbara, the great martyr, and John of Damascus. Barbara is beloved so much in the Arab speaking part of the world that they all the kids dress up like Halloween, like and celebrate her feast day. Like, no, December 4th is like Halloween over there. There's also what they have berbara, which is like the boiled wheat that we have, like also known as like koliva. But this is kind of disseminated out for all the people to eat on her feast day. So it's a big deal. Who else? The same day we celebrate John of Damascus. John of Damascus is a 7th and 8th century saint. Amazing guy who I could talk for a while about. I actually wrote a small article online about his life, and I argued whether he was the first of the Arab speaking saints or the last of the Greek speakers, of the Greek fathers. So he's like the last of the Greek fathers of the church, and he wrote everything in Greek. He spoke Arabic. He worked for the caliphate. Because he was a Christian, so he could be trusted, especially with the money, because they don't steal, right? So he was a prolific writer, a wonderful musician, and he basically gave us the 8 tones of the church, or 8 modes of the church that I sang for you last time. He he's known for that. The funeral hymns that were written from his time, which is like 1400 years ago. Just pen. I mean, the words that he used. I mean, it's just unbelievable, beautiful. Paschal odes. God is the Lord who has showed us the light. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. That 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 hymn in all the 8 modes that we sing at matins is attributed to John of Damascus. He's just so prolific and was so for a long time. His hand was cut off and it was sewn back together by the Virgin Mary. That he was so thankful that she healed his hand that he had an icon of her commissioned and then put a third hand, silver hand, on the bottom. So this became known as the icon of the Virgin Mary with of 3 hands. But he actually painted his own hand on there. Eventually, there are icons that actually show a third hand of the Virgin Mary, which is something different. But they get muddled when you talk about them. But I can't speak enough about John of Damascus. I mean, he's just incredible, uh, incredible saint of the church. He also wrote treatises like very intelligent. Defended the use of icons in the church, in the churches. Uh, Told an exact exposition of the Holy Orthodox Church. Like, what do we believe? Like, all the things. If you read his material, it's really fascinating to get into the mind of the Greek fathers from that era. Just the way they thought, just totally different than the way we think now, and brilliant. I mean, it doesn't take anything away from them. They're really awesome. Saint Sabas the Sanctified on the 5th. So he is known for the typikon that is in that's known as the Mar Sabas typikon, that's used in Jerusalem to this day. So he's a really big saint. Nicholas, the wonder worker of Myra and Lycia. I mean, Santa Claus, December 7th. I mean, he's the one that slaps Arius at the First Ecumenical Council. He's the one that the Virgin Mary and Christ come into his jail cell, bringing him the gospel and his vestments and telling him to put them on. And then all these bishops dreamed that they saw this, that had actually happened, and they came into his cell sensing him. There are no writings of St. Nicholas of Myra and Lycia, only stories about how pious a life he lived and how wonderful a bishop he is and was. And he continues to work wonders. He is, a patron saint for sailors. And on 9/11, his church was the one that was destroyed here in America in downtown Manhattan, and on the at the site of the church was a ship that was buried underneath the church many years before. So really fascinating uh, in our time even, and he gets known as Saint Nicholas Niklaus, so Santa Claus, Santa Claus. That's how you get that name. He's really a fascinating, absolutely fascinating figure, even to in the modern age. Obviously, they give him a these red ho ho ho, and um, they dressed him up. I guess Coca Cola was guilty of doing that at some point, but nevertheless, Saint Nicholas of Myra and Lycia, fantastic saint. Again, we're in a fast. We're feasting, right? So I will also say that his body was transferred to Bari in Italy, and we have parishioners here that visited there and brought back holy oil. So whenever I have liturgy for Saint Nicholas, we tend to get anointed with his holy oil as well. 7th of December, Saint Ambrose of Milan. Uh, he's an amazing saint too. He was not even a Orthodox Christian, and the Bishop of Milan died, and they needed a new bishop. So a baby at the breast of his mother cried out, Ambrose for bishop. Everyone took this as a sign from God and elected him bishop. So he was baptized, ordained to the diaconate, ordained to the priesthood, ordained to the bishopric within like a week and a half. Okay? This is exceptional, not the rule. And he turned out to be an amazing bishop of Milan, Italy, what's now known as Italy. And just so much so that he is the one. He is the reason a phrase very commonly used. Some guy was out down in Rome, visiting the church in Rome, and the way they do things in Rome was different than the way they do things and practice and worship in Italy, in Milan rather. And he writes this letter back to and complaining to Bishop Ambrose, and he says, "Oh, look how they do this, and they do this differently, and they do this differently, and what am I supposed to do?" And he famously responds, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do." That's where you get that phrase. So there you go. St. Ambrose of Milan, the 7th. December 9th, we have the conception of the Theotokos. So remember last time we spoke about how she was born on September 8th. Well, now she is conceived on December 9th. You see how that works? So it's a 9 months less a day. Is kind of how her that's what her conception is. Again, we're having a small feast during feast during a fasting period. So I mean, it's a pretty big deal. All right, then right before Christmas, you have two Sundays that kind of take place. And these Sundays, one of them is known as the Sunday of the Holy Forefathers, and the following Sunday is called the Sunday before the Nativity, which is also known as Genealogy Sunday. So, the Sunday where we go basically through the list from, I think, Adam to there's 13 generations between Adam and David. And then they go into the Babylonian captivity, and then from the Babylonian captivity to Christ. There's 13 generations, so it's like 13, 13, 13 from from all these fathers. Forgive me, it's kind of muddled in my head right now, but that's called Genealogy Sunday. The Sunday before that, we're kind of remembering all the forefathers, so like these prophetic guys who basically talk about the coming of Jesus Christ. So David gets remembered, Abraham gets remembered, and then some of the prophets like Samuel or something along those lines. So just keep that in mind. It's a really keep that in mind when you see it that these happen um, right before the Christmas, the Nativity of Christ, which is obviously we all know that Christmas it's December 25th. Um, Spiridon of Trimitus on December 12th. Okay, so like I said just a little bit ago, this kind of uh, catapults the Greeks into okay, now we're fasting. So this is when fasting like really gets intense for everybody, definitely. All the Orthodox churches around the world. If they've been a little mediocre at best going through the beginning of this fast, for obvious reasons, there's a lot of feasts, but this is when it intensifies. So Spiridon of Trimitus is the wonder worker, and he's the reason for that. In America, we remember Saint Herman of Alaska. Um, he's the first saint that comes to America. Okay, by way of Alaska, he ends up in Alaska in the Kodiak Islands, if I'm not mistaken. Really pious, really humble. Wasn't a priest, but did some baptizing of the people there. He was a contemporary with Saint Seraphim of Sarov, which we will talk about in January. But a really big, pretty awesome saint in the church. I think America really likes him because Alaska is part of America now. Um, I I tend to think that that's kind of a stretch to because Alaska was part of Russia at the time um, when he was evangelizing, if you will. But America, we love our saints. Saint Herman of Alaska. Alaska is America at this point. So we love our first saint of this of this country, if you will. Um, and he's awesome. I mean, he's a really an awesome saint. We also commemorate that day Saint Lucia, the Virgin Martyr. Um, they do a dance in Sweden where they light candles around their heads and do a dance around, which is really kind of neat. Also, that still happens. So she's an interesting virgin martyr. Uh, Eleftherios on the 15th of December. Daniel the prophet and the three holy youths, Ananias, Azarias, and Mishael, on the 17th of December. I mean, of Old Testament saints, the Old Testament book of Daniel, I mean, is probably one of the more fascinating books. Talks about the Ancient of Days, and Daniel is thrown into the lion's den, and Azarias, Ananias, and Mishael are thrown into the fire. And there's one, like the son of man, who's in the fire. Didn't we throw in three? And why do I see four? That's what Nebuchadnezzar was asking. I mean, the stories from that period were just are just so fascinating, and they get a feast day on the 17th, and rightfully so. Uh, Boniface and his companions of Thessaloniki on the 19th. Ignatius of Antioch. So Saint Ignatius of Antioch, whom I spoke of before, he wrote all those beautiful letters, and during that era called the Apostolic Fathers. Saint Ignatius of Antioch went to his death, and he was devoured by lions. So, I find it always find it fascinating that they're separated by 3 days. That Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den, and he gets not dead. Ignatius gets thrown into the arena with lions, and he gets martyred that way. So where God wills, it can happen either way. And here's just the two examples, just back to back, essentially. Saint Ignatius is the first bishop of Antioch. Or he's the third bishop of Antioch. He's you know, also the child that sat on Christ's lap when he said, "Let the little children come unto me, and do not forbid them, for such is the kingdom of heaven." So whenever you see the icon of Christ blessing the little children, you can't help but to see Saint Ignatius of Antioch. He's sitting on his lap. Um, then you have the Nativity of Christ on December 25th, which is, I don't know, a major feast. It wasn't the most major a feast, though it's become one of the more major feasts in the modern day. Um, but this is celebrating Christ's birth in Bethlehem. So Christ takes flesh. Bethlehem, it's the house of flesh where he takes flesh. Um, Bethlehem, which is in Hebrew the house of bread, which is absolutely fascinating that even like where Christ was born, you have this idea of flesh and bread, and they come together. I mean, in the two Semitic languages of Arabic and Hebrew, you have the adoration of the Magi. So the Magi come from the far east. They come to worship him, the newborn king. It actually says that they came to worship him, and they did. You have the shepherds. They come and they hear the angels, um, make a proclamation about Christ. The very next day, like you've seen in the past, we see that Joseph the betrothed is commemorated on the 26th. David the prophet is commemorated on the 26th. James, the brother of the Lord, is commemorated on the 26th because they went into Egypt, and out of Egypt I have called my son. So Joseph and James kind of get um, lumped together with that story on the 26th because of what they did in Egypt. Then the synaxis of the Theotokos, so the Virgin Mary, obviously she had a big to do with with Christ's birth, so she gets a nod as well. The proto martyr Stephen, he's the first saint who died, you know, uh, in died for Christ after Christ rose from the dead. So he's the one that was stoned to death, and Paul was there, and he was still Saul, and saw it and witnessed it, um, and basically wanted it to happen, and that's what happened. The 29th of December, we commemorate the 14,000 infants slain by Herod. So, Herod was diabolical, I guess is the way to put it, and he wanted to kill Christ, and he basically figured out that the only way to kill Christ is to kill all the babies that are under 2 years old, and so he basically did that. So we commemorate these little saints, these little infants, as saints. They were the first to die for Christ. I mean, they're martyrs. I mean, for Christ, really, really. Whether they knew it or not, that's what they did. All right, so that's the 29th. That basically ends December, and we after right after Christmas, we have like these 12 days of Christmas, which is kind of going to end with uh, Christ getting baptized in the Jordan River. So what's called theophany, when God is revealed to us, or also known as the Epiphany, something along those lines. So there's 12 days of Christmas. That song is kind of that. And if you really look at the way that the church services are structured, you really have this idea that Christmas and Theophany are like the same feast. Okay? It's when Christ's ministry began. At Christmas and at Theophany. I mean, it's so they're not separated by a lot of time. It's 12 days. And so this period of time is relatively fast free, and since we got out of the fasting period there, and we fast again on the 5th of right before Theophany in preparation for Theophany, uh, because a lot of people are going to be baptized that day. Um, but that's about it. I mean, it's a very feasty period. Again, we feast after the fast, so there you go. So on the 1st of January, we commemorate the circumcision of the Lord, also known as the day of his naming, right? So he's named on the 8th day. Okay, that tradition continues, and we commemorate that. So he becomes a Jew officially on the 8th day, and he receives his name. This is something that's in the scripture itself. We do that on January 1. Well, that's the new year for all of us. So on that feast day, we also commemorate a major saint of the church known as Saint Basil the Great. Some would pronounce it Basil, but basil, like the basil leaf. Okay, and he is one of the great orators of the church. Again, he's one of the great saints. He wrote a book that we have, the SVS has published, on the Holy Spirit. So he really kind of gives us an idea of how the Holy Spirit is God. One of the triune Godhead. So we're gonna kind of find a way. Shortly, we're gonna remember another Gregory here in January, and then John Chrysostom is gonna get a third day, another day in January, because his relics were moved. They were translated, meaning they moved. Like you translate from one language to another, right? So you move from one language to another. It's kind of the idea there. It's a translation of his relics in January. So when you have this thing that's you're gonna see who of these is the greatest. So Basil is basically remembered as one of the greatest of all the saints. So you have him having a liturgy that's named after him, the liturgy of Saint Basil the Great, which we do about 10 times a year. It's going to get done on his feast day on January 1, and also will be done a whole bunch during Lent, and a few other times during the year. But mostly gets the liturgy of Saint John uh, Chrysostom, and very very rarely do we do the liturgy of Saint James. Um, but it happens. So Saint Seraphim of Sarov is going to be the saint um, of Russia, the great saint of Russia. He is, oh man, what a fascinating figure of Orthodoxy. 1800s he lives, and he is canonized during the reign of Saint Tsar Nicholas II. Tsar Nicholas II. Actually, there's pictures of him carrying the casket of Saint Seraphim of Sarov at his glorification. So when a saint becomes canonized, a saint, when they get added to the service that we do, it's called a glorification. So Saint Saint Nicholas II of the Tsar, Saint Nicholas II, he ends up being at the glorification of Saint Seraphim of Sarov. Saint Seraphim of Sarov is like a monk. He is one who prays the Jesus prayer and is able to see the uncreated light. It is told by a guy named Dmitri who visits him, and it's the dead of winter, and they're both like warm, even though it's snowing outside, like because they had gotten to experience this uncreated light, this uncreated energy of God, and Saint Seraphim was a really sickly kid. He couldn't really walk. Um, there was a procession with an icon of the Virgin Mary that heals, that went through his town, his hometown, and and his mother made him go outside and venerate the icon, and he was immediately healed. And so he devoted the rest of his life to her. And he had an icon of the Virgin Mary in his cell. He didn't have many possessions. Some robbers came to rob him. He slept on. I mean, he slept on a pillow made of rocks. I mean, like that. They beat him. They beat him mercilessly. He forgave them later. He's just a fascinating figure, and a lot of like I told you about Saint Gabriel of Georgia that helped to bring the Georgians back to the faith. Saint Seraphim does the same for Russia. Um, he's really a fascinating saint in the life of the church, and you know he's remembered on January 2nd. The next day, we remember Malachi the prophet, as well as Genevieve of Paris. Genevieve is a popular name right now. My niece has the name Genevieve. So she must be a popular saint for a lot of reasons. She's the saint of Paris, and she was a contemporary of Saint Simeon Stylites, and she would write him letters back and forth, asking for advice, and he would give them to her. Synaxis of the 70 holy apostles. So there are 12 apostles, and then there's 70. So this is all 70 of them, known as the apostles. So I've told you before that there's a lot of 12. There's a lot of different lists of the 12 apostles, but definitely encompassing in the 12 is the 70. So this is a synaxis, a gathering again on the 4th. Theophany of Christ happens on January 6th. It and of course that the very next day, since Jesus Christ is baptized in the Jordan River, we commemorate John the Baptist. So that's his synaxis, his day, and so John the Baptist is on the 7th. So you see that pattern kind of keep playing out. Theophany is when Jesus Christ was baptized in the Jordan River. The Jordan River turned back. The water flows from the Sea of Galilee, south, into the Dead Sea. And so Christ was baptized in the Jordan River. There's a lot of symbolism there. The Israelites crossed over the Jordan with Joshua. He took them into the promised land. Well, Joshua is going to take us into the promised land through the Jordan River, through our baptism. So as many of you has been baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. So we need to be baptized according to Christ. And, that's something that is initiation rites for all those who are Christians and take part in the sacramental life of the church. So certainly baptism is a big part of that. Major feast. Probably the second most major feast of the church calendar. Theophany. We throw water, we bless water, and then we throw it throughout the church. There are many churches go out into like another body of water and bless the water, and they make a big feast out of that too, like an outdoor water space. Maybe someday we'll do that here in Atlanta, God willing. Gregory of Nyssa, on the 10th of January. I always get these Gregorys all mixed up. So he is the brother of Saint Basil the Great, a pretty prolific writer as well. But he's not the Gregory the theologian, who is going to be commemorated on the 25th. So this question of who's the greatest of the bishops is referring to Gregory the theologian, who was able to articulate the triune Godhead in such a way that we can understand it. Basil the Great is known for his liturgy, as well as his theology. Uh, John Chrysostom is known for his golden mouth. So, uh, these three saints are going to kind of get separated out and get their feast days separately, but they're also going to get a feast day together, and I'll get there on the 30th of January. So I'll just tell you about that right now. So they all get commemorated together. Which one of them is the greatest? All three of them are the greatest. So stop. The church was actually arguing pretty harshly as to which one's the greatest, and it was causing schisms. So they all kind of appeared at once to say we're all three equal in the eyes of Christ. So that seemed to heal any of the rifts that any of the people had at the time. So Tatiana, the martyr of Rome, on the 12th. Nina of Georgia on the 14th, with Sabas of Serbia, who is a prince, if I'm not mistaken, on the 14th. So Nina is the cousin of Saint George, who we'll hear about in April. Saint George is the great martyr. His cousin takes the message of Christianity to Georgia, the country, and she is named Nina. Really, her name is pronounced Nino amongst the Georgians, but obviously in America, Nino sounds like a boy's name, so they make it Nina. But it's the same saint. She's really remembered for bringing Christianity to the whole country of Georgia, which is the first official country that is Christian, which is not an easy distinction. Sometimes the Armenians argue, but they're in the same geographical region. Sometimes the Armenians argue, no, we were first. Well, but Nina of Georgia first, okay. Anthony the Great, 17th of December. Anthony the Great is known for his 38 sayings, incredibly prolific in the life of monasteries, monasticism. So once Christianity gets legalized in 325, you have this, all the city dwellers are now becoming Christians, and they're not like as pious as they could be. So he hears the gospel. It says, if you wish to be perfect, go sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. He hears that from the gospel reading that day. He goes, sells all that he has, gives it to the poor, puts his sister in a monastery, and he goes out into the wilderness to follow Christ. He finds like a cave, essentially, like, I don't know, hundreds of feet up into the air, where no one can really get access to him, and he prays and he prays and he prays with very little food, and is just able to really defeat the devil out in the wilderness and become one of the greatest saints in the history of the church. Now, if you ever go to a church of Saint Anthony, you might come across something strange on the iconostasis. It's an Athonite tradition to paint Saint Anthony on the right next to Jesus Christ, and move Saint John the Baptist to the other side. So he's really interesting in that respect. So if you ever get to go and see a church that has the patron Saint Anthony, you might see a little bit different images on the iconostasis, and maybe I'll explain to you an iconostasis some other point in the future. All right, Macarius the Great of Egypt, Mark of Ephesus on the 19th. Mark of Ephesus, basically there was a council, I think the Council of Trent in 1451. Please don't hold me to that. But Mark of Ephesus is going to be the one bishop who refuses to reconnect with the church in Rome on theological grounds, and he rallies the whole church around him. All the lay people preserve orthodoxy because of Mark of Ephesus. He's not a small saint. Ephesus, if you always remember, is one of those churches in Revelation. Um, one of the early churches of the that was overseen by John the theologian, and Christ actually speaks to them through the book of Revelation. So the Virgin Mary is believed to have been there as well in that community. Maximus the Confessor, really prolific. He's got a lot of written material. He confesses the faith very articulately. He answers any hard questions that you might have regarding the scriptures. I believe his tongue was cut off because he was, offensively good at teaching the faith. 24th, Saint Xenia of Saint Petersburg. She is another fool for Christ, like Saint Gabriel of Georgia. She lost her husband to a drinking party. He kind of went there, I don't know, maybe played Russian roulette or something and died. Maybe he drank too much, played Russian roulette and died, or something like that. He died young, like in his 20s. And I don't know if he played Russian roulette. I'm just making that up. But he definitely died at a drinking party. And it just totally, they were childless. Just totally derailed her, I guess. She went to a monastery for like 8 years, learned about the Christian life, the Christian way of life, and became a great ascetical saint. Came back to St. Petersburg, dressed like her husband, Andre. So she told people her name was Andre, and so they thought she was crazy. And little did they know that she was really a saintly woman, and she would do all kinds of amazing things for them, and could see the future, and could tell them nice things about their lives, or there was someone's house was on fire. She told them, go to your house, it's on fire, real quick. Could see things that are happening in other parts of the town. She told the one woman she was sitting at a table, I don't know, probably making pierogies or something, and they were preparing food, whatever it was. So she was there, and this young woman, was there too, and she goes, "Oh, quickly, quickly, go to the cemetery. Your husband is burying his wife." Say that again. Your husband is burying his wife. Go to the cemetery. So the girl gets up, runs to the cemetery, and there's a man who later becomes her husband. He was actually burying his wife, who bore him a few children, and so she went there to the cemetery and found him, and later married him. I mean, it's Saint Xenia of Saint Petersburg. She's known for helping you find your spouse. She's known for helping you find work, keeping you gainfully employed. She's known for helping you find a roof over your head. If you feel like you're homeless or something like that, or you can't find lodging or something along those lines. I rely on her a lot, so I tell a lot of people to go to her and pray to her, and she is phenomenal. Saint Gregory the Theologian, who I've talked about already, on the 25th. Translation of the relics of Saint John Chrysostom on the 27th. So this is when his relics were moved. So there you go. Those are the three big saints, all in January, and then they get commemorated together on the 30th, known as the Synaxis of the Three Holy Hierarchs, on the 30th. Now, interestingly enough, the translation of the relics of Saint Ignatius of Antioch happened on the 29th of January, and this is exactly 40 days after we commemorate him on December 20th, which is really fascinating if you ever calculate it. On the 28th, we commemorate Ephraim and Isaac the Syrians. These guys are like poets, theological poets. And one thing that's interesting about St. Ephraim, recently read this, so it's fresh on my mind. He was ordained a deacon by the hands of Saint Basil the Great. Okay, he wrote some incredible poetry, theological poetry. I mean, just beautiful orations. Um, kind of like David did. David wrote his psalter. Ephraim the Syrian wrote his psalter. Now Ephraim is was an angry dude when he was young, and he became a monk, and his anger went away from him. And he really practiced the ascetical life, and I would say mastered it. And Christ was very pleased with him. Um, I don't know if you ever get a chance. There's a book that Saint Theophan the Recluse put together called the Psalter of Saint Ephraim the Syrian. Phenomenal, phenomenal prayer book. And so I give that to you. I lend that over to you. So you see, we've gone through November, December, and January. A lot of saints, lots of big saints in the church. We get into February, and you're gonna kind of just be like, where are all the saints? I mean, there's saints. No, don't get me wrong, but like, they're not the big ones, the great ones. Why? Well, because we're entering into a fasting period. Generally speaking, we're gonna get into the Paschal cycle, and so if it's okay, we'll begin in February next time. You'll see that February, March, April go really quickly. We'll talk inside of February about the Paschal cycle, because that's generally where it happens. I mean, obviously, it can happen at a different time, but that's kind of generally where it all begins. So I will see you next time, and we will talk. We'll probably get through the rest of the calendar lesson. So I'll see you next time. God bless you.